If you still don't think that what you watch on TV has any influence on you, this video is for you because
I've been saying this for a long time. The media that we take in directly influences how we see and interact with the world.
In the research I did for my dissertation, the phenomenon they were referring to was priming, and it was mainly tied to the media and how they portray certain types of people. And basically the idea that she was saying was more tied to the ideals and the things that are in TV shows and things on Netflix because of the people that own or are part of the board or whatever. But I think this idea can, and more specifically, be applied to any form of media where people are not directly getting information from a certain group of people. I can guarantee you that people in the middle of Idaho who've never met a black person gets all their information and things for the last 50 years from the media and the way that they're portraying and talking about people of color. So you can assume, and science shows this, that the way that they will interact with them is going to be directly correlated with the way that the people on the media are talking about and showing them. And historically, for example, it's been very negative.
This is a list of 5 celebrities that I feel are most likely to be ableist. Now this might get controversial, and I don't want the fans of these people coming after me. Okay, I don't make the rules. Also, before we get into it, I just want to say there are ways to support me in my bio, and if you wanted to check it out, that would mean a lot. Alright, let's jump into the list. Starting off the list, we've got Justin Bieber. I just feel like if my Make-A-Wish was to meet him, it would be really bad. Like, he would meet me backstage, say that he's happy I'm alive, hand me a beanie, and then go perform Yummy. Number 2, we got Ed Sheeran. Again, I feel like if my Make-A-Wish was to meet him, it would just be so boring. Also, when he said, when your legs don't work like they used to before, I took that personally. Number 3, I'm covering the only disabled character. Number 3, we have the entire cast of Glee. I will never forgive them for the choreographed dance number with 2 people in wheelchairs to Elton John's I'm Still Standing. That was a violation. Number 4, we have Drake. I feel like if I met him, he would say something like, "Gee Willikers, you sure do inspire me." Also, I feel like he would tell me that he understands the struggle because he used to play somebody in a wheelchair. Last but not least, we've got Kanye. I feel like Kanye would say the most wild things to me and thinking that he's making me feel better. Like he would say, "I hope to one day be as disabled as you," and then hand me a Bible.
Now, Pakistan is at the forefront of the climate crisis.
So y'all remember a couple weeks ago when everyone was reporting on the $370 billion for climate initiatives included in the Inflation Reduction Act? Was I the only one who couldn't stop thinking about how $370 billion is still less than half of our annual military budget? And like, this is the other context that was missing from all of that reporting, which at least from what I saw was pretty overwhelmingly congratulatory, talking about the political significance of the victory, how it's going to get us to 40% below our 2005 emission levels by 2030, which to me feels like kind of a weird way to report on it, given that the damage is happening right now. It's just happening to people who in our mainstream political context, we don't really care about, whether that's brown people on the other side of the world in Pakistan or black people right here in the US in Jackson, Mississippi. Those are lives that fundamentally in our mainstream cultural context, we don't really care about. And so it was really easy for the New York Times to report on this in primarily a political context, patting Biden and Manchin on the back, which for me just highlighted the enormous amount of privilege involved in being able to view this as a political issue at all, instead of as a crisis mitigation and disaster response issue, which if you value the lives being disrupted right now is the only way to view it. And when you view it in that context, no, $370 billion is not nearly enough. Our goals themselves are not aggressive enough. Our timeline is not fast enough. I am not saying that that money counts for nothing. It counts for $370 billion more than nothing. But what I am saying is that in the US in particular, we owe so much more than that to the rest of the world and to marginalized communities right here in the US that are being affected by the climate crisis right now.
Being a good person worth it? A study at Harvard in 2009 called that into question.
Anytime I see one of these psychology experiments that's published by a Western institution like Harvard, especially when it has to do with morality, I'm reminded of the Stanford prison experiment, which at this point has been completely debunked. There are journals like the American Psychologist that have gone into thorough detail as to why that was experimentally flawed. There were all sorts of issues with the way that test was conducted. But I just want you all to think about who the subjects of the Stanford prison experiment were. It was a bunch of college-aged white boys. And the world heard, this study and just went off to make massive generalizations about society based off the behavior of a bunch of 18 to 19-year-old white boys in America. So when I hear, this Harvard study being cited, and you see the moral spectrum of good and bad being pinned on the Dalai Lama and Ted Bundy, it's an immediate red flag. Because sure, I might find Ted Bundy morally reprehensible, but all you need to do is turn on Netflix to see that there are documentaries and movies and shows glorifying and romanticizing this character, So there's already a massive, cognitive dissonance happening at the baseline of the study. I just want to challenge you guys to think a little bit more critically and not allow a Harvard study to dictate whether or not you choose to be a good or bad person. That's all.
If your feminism is not trans-inclusive, that's just transphobia. If your feminism is not inclusive of BIPOC people, that's just racism. If your feminism is not inclusive of disabled people, that's just ableism. If your feminism does not center working class women, that's just you being a bootlicker.
Alright, Canada and other capitalist countries with universal healthcare do not have perfect healthcare systems like they're sometimes made out to be. But healthcare is one place where the US is uniquely bad. In 2015, David Squires and Chloe Anderson of the Commonwealth Fund did a comparative analysis of 13 different countries' healthcare systems. And the US had the most expensive healthcare system by far, which was not due to more hospital admissions or doctor's visits, but was actually due to high spending on medical technology and high prices. Included in those prices are billions of dollars in yearly profit for healthcare corporations and their shareholders. And despite the high spending, Americans have poor health outcomes related to other countries with a high prevalence of chronic conditions and low life expectancy. US life expectancy has been declining as corporate healthcare profits have been skyrocketing. Then people say we can't afford a public healthcare system. Like, what do you mean? How can we afford this system? The only people who can't afford to change the system are these vultures. National.
Did you know that the earliest named author in history wrote about transgender people and may have been trans herself? Let me tell you about Enheduanna, the Gala priesthood, and transgender people in ancient Sumeria. We do not know her assigned gender at birth, but Enheduanna was the daughter of Sargon of Akkad in 23rd century BC. She would then join the priesthood of Inanna, where she would become the high priestess. Here's where things get interesting. We know that the Inannan priests transitioned genders. They had trans men, trans women, and non-binary people in it. They were revered as leaders. And here's the coolest part. Enheduanna, the first named author in human history, wrote a poem to Inanna. She says joyfully, "The power to turn men into women and women into men are yours, Inanna." Inanna C, the text where this comes from, is still preserved. When I think about the temple complex that Enheduanna and the priests of Gala served in, all I can think about is the existence of transgender people 5,000 years ago, living happily and being revered as leaders. We have always been here.
Rapid fire guide to good goblin imagery versus bad goblin imagery. Anti-Semitic goblin, hook nose, oily slick black hair, and black eyes. All anti-Semitic tropes. Racist goblin has a pig nose, sharp teeth, red-yellow eyes or red-yellow skin, oily black hair, and a top knot, clearly Orientalism inspired. Our first unproblematic goblin is very child plus animal inspired. You're not sure, is it like a cat, bat thing? What's going on here? Some goblin imagery that might be a problem you run into is the sort of poverty porn aspect, where they're tiny, grotesque, and poor people that live off of trash clothing. Otherwise, physically, this goblin is fine. These guys are also goblins. They're little hedge goblins. They're adorable. They've got pig noses, but they're fine because it's more on the animal side. This one has a big hook nose, but again, it's so animalistic it just seems more like a beak than a nose. Look at this fuzzy little frog man with antenna. Who could be mad at him? No, nothing problematic here.
Hey, good morning. What year do you think this photo was taken? 40s, 50s, 60s, 70 something? Pause it. Let me know in the comments. What year do you think this photo was taken, okay? You finished? Okay. This photo was taken at a Klan rally in Gainesville, Georgia by Todd Robinson on September 5th, 1992. Officer Campbell said he didn't even know the kid was there. He just looked down to see what was bumping his shield. And when he did, he saw 2-year-old Josh dressed in full Klan regalia, admiring his reflection in Officer Campbell's shield. Now, Officer Campbell said that none of them wanted to be there that day. He said that his job forced him to be there, and the little boy's mom and daddy brought him to the Klan rally. Now, this is 1992, the same year that brought us the animated series of X-Men, Batman, and Spider-Man. It's important to remember that everybody in that photo is still alive. That was September 5th, 1992. That happened on this day in history.
You have a meeting and someone is late for the meeting.
Okay.
Give me 2-3 reasons as to why they are late.
Traffic. They woke up late. Someone died.
Did you know that people tend to assume things like they're lazy, they don't care about this meeting, they're doing this to waste my time?
That's so rude. Is this why? Wait, fuck. Nikki's been working with me to talk to ADA because I keep showing up like 5 minutes late to things because I either sleep in or my body hurts, so it takes me longer to get places. And Nikki's like, so I know that this is because you're disabled, but I need to do things about it because people keep getting angry that you're coming late. And I'm like, why?
But the thing is, people, when they're late, they attribute it to things like traffic or sleeping in, but then they don't do that for others.
People are gross.
I'm trying to...
You ever wondered what items in your place just give men the ick?
No.
If it hadn't been for Cotton Eye Joe, I'd been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe? If it hadn't been for Cotton Eye Joe, I'd been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton?
My body, my choice, unless it's student loan debt, that's when somebody else should step in. We're turning this country into a complete welfare state. What would the Bible say? And forgive us our debts as we do our debtors. Let's try the next page. Look, if we solve student debt, then I'm broke. Then the system is broken. We just have to appeal to the other side with a different offer. If you're an uncle that's unreasonably close to your niece, you get $15K. You want to force blue-collar workers to pay for some California chick's gender dance degree? That's not forgiveness, that's free money. We should be focusing on the important issues, like war and corporate bailouts. Instead, we sink deeper into social. They made everybody go to college and it didn't work out. Own up to that. What about the people who don't have student debt? Nobody's celebrating us. We have nothing to be happy about. After Biden canceled $10,000 of my student debt, I think I'll be able to pay it off by 873 now instead of 76. Thank you, student loans. I don't think I can ever repay you. Only 10K? Weren't we making fun of Joe Biden that he would only do a half measure a couple months ago? Whatever. I haven't been paying student debt in 2 years, so it's already baked in. Giving me a payday a couple months before an election cycle is just smart. This isn't gonna affect inflation. Hell, it's not even an expense. They can change the denominator at any time. Nobody expects this to be paid back. They're gonna go door to door asking the working class for money to pay for this jubilee, cause money is fake. But debt is one of the oldest, easiest ways to maintain power and control over people, which is why forgiveness is so unforgivable. It challenges power. Cancel student debt. If they can subsidize chip makers, big pharma, big oil and weapon contractors, then why not our students?
My eyes.
Don't worry.
Mother raised to find you, man.
Daddy's home.
And I know
Hello everyone. I just caught word that Queen Elizabeth has passed away. Today we lost a figure of grace and dignity. In Britain, no, the world will never be the same. And I understand that there's a lot of animosity towards the crown because of rampant imperialism and colonialism, and that a lot of people's homelands were absolutely devastated and will never be the same, and that zero effort in paying reparations has been done. But park that. A family is mourning right now. Never mind the video, it's unrelated.
Rates of depression and anxiety were higher amongst black kids. But for this story,
mental health issues in black youth are often treated like personality flaws. How many times do we need to hear the trope about black girls having attitudes? Or black boys being aggressive and unmotivated? Those don't sound like they might be symptoms of depression, anxiety, or PTSD. What's wild is that we love to hear the hopeless narrative and to talk about their communities like they're war zones. But we won't consider the mental health impacts of growing up amongst those narratives, because they've been dehumanized. How else could we explain allowing them to live in conditions that most wouldn't accept for their own kids and then punishing them for the mental health consequences of those conditions? Suspending them, arresting them, ostracizing them from society. A few years ago, I started paying for mental health services for a handful of kids on the West Side, and I learned that there actually was no stigma around seeking therapy. They just never had access to it. They've been convinced by teachers and even school counselors that what were clear mental health issues were just their personal flaws. We'll only see the need for mental health services in black communities when we humanize black kids.
A lot of people are sad that the queen is dead. Meanwhile, the whole native community is over here like this.
You know, I got to admit, it was a brilliant tactic on the part of the Republican Party that over the last few decades, they have successfully redefined any kind of positive government action as socialism, which effectively has conditioned their base to never want or expect help. Bravo, you fucking monsters.
I'm scrolling through Twitter when I come across this. As you can see, there's a white woman who's been a lifelong Democrat and she's partnered with a man who's a lifelong Republican. And I found this commentary to be so interesting, I wanted to make a whole TikTok about it. I think a big reason that some white women end up partnering with white men who are more conservative than they are is because they gain more social capital and currency by allying themselves with whiteness as opposed to their marginalized identity. Being in closer proximity to white men by bolstering white masculinity is more beneficial than allying themselves with women and other marginalized peoples to fight for justice. It's about power and white sovereignty.
Without failure, every single time somebody talks about Europe's history with racism, there's always one person that says like, oh, the USA is still more racist, or no, we're not racist, the US is racist. How much time do you have? Because there's a lot of countries in Europe. Let's start with the home of the Queen. Do you know why most of the world speaks English as the international business language? That's because the UK doesn't know how to mind their business. Indians, Jamaicans, Nigerians all face so much xenophobia in the UK, literally just because of where they're from, even though England literally colonized them. Mind you, parts of the UK are literally colonized by England. And I would hope, since you're paying so much attention to the United States, that you're also paying attention to your literal neighbor, France, who is literally one of the most Islamophobic countries in the world, right? Because let's not pretend that women who are hijabis are not racialized. But if you weren't paying attention to France, we can move a little more south, to the Iberian Peninsula. Yes, world tour. Are we going to pretend that Portuguese adolescents aren't hugely influenced by Brazilian influencers to the point where their parents are trying to keep them away from Brazilian media because they don't want them to talk like Brazilian, they don't want them to sound like that? And do not even get me started on the way that the Portuguese government treats people from Angola and Mozambique. Oh, but you can slither right to Spain, and guess what? I could talk about this one all day. Latino businesses in Catalonia being shut down because of all the taxes that the Spanish government is putting on them, but people who are ethnically Catalan don't have to pay those same taxes? Yeah. And I'm not saying immigrants shouldn't pay taxes, but when you're charging them double the amount of people that are from Catalonia, yeah, it looks a little wrong. Or we can also talk about the political oppression that's causing the rise of Latino political parties in Spain. Or we can literally talk about the right-wing party, the Vox party in Spain, that literally hates Latino immigrants. Or we can talk about all the North Africans that the Spanish government is responsible for killing at the Moroccan border. Should I keep going? I feel like you're not getting the point yet. Should we ignore the hundreds of black and brown people who have said how uncomfortable they feel in Rome and Italy because of how much they're stared at for looking a little different? Or we could talk about how your entire continent, well, barely a continent at that, treat Romani people, because clearly you guys don't like them either. Or are we going to talk about how even though they're European, you guys treat Eastern Europeans like they're subhumans? To the point where they used my audio about European nonsense against Western Europeans because of the history of how you guys have treated them? Yeah, I think that's good for now. I am in no way excusing this country, because this country, the United States, is easily one of the most racist countries in the entire world. But it irks me whenever a European tries to make it seem like it's all peaceful over there when we know that's not the case. Because at the end of the day, whose governments were it that put all these systems into place? Where do you think Columbus sailed from? Antarctica?
I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty.
You can excuse racism.
Do not scroll past this video. Don't scroll past this video. I'm so serious. The Queen of England, she kicked the bucket, okay? But there's a very valuable lesson here, and if you use any social media, you see people making jokes, and you probably have seen people say now is not the time. And I'm gonna address this because this is a learning moment, a teachable moment. Don't you goddamn scroll, I mean it. All right, so these are the 15 characteristics of white supremacy culture. If you're unfamiliar, this means that these are the traits that keep white supremacy alive and racism alive. I swear to God, don't you scroll, because this is valuable information. I'm not going to go in on all of them, but what's happening right now is this last one, and that is the right to comfort. Learn you something. Again, if you scroll, you hate black people, but this is some of the description of the right to comfort, okay? I know some of y'all don't like to read, so I'm going to read the first part for y'all, okay? The first point says that it is the belief that those who have power have the right to emotional and psychological comfort, okay? Like, now is not the time. People are mourning, so they need to be comfortable while they're doing that. The second point is scapegoating people who cause discomfort, aka calling people immoral for joking and saying now is not the time because they want to address things that need to be addressed, like the heinous things that the royal family has done. And the third point here is equating individual acts of unfairness to systemic oppression and racism against white people. It's not the same thing. If you claim to be somebody who really wants to see racism end in our lifetime, you really need to know these things, and you need to challenge yourself in the ways that you may be perpetuating these things, okay? That's all I got to say. I ain't got to add nothing else. You can scroll now. The male gaze? Shit, that's my favorite type of dude.
That's not what the male gaze
No,
is.
why would you let me find love and peace, man?
The white activist explains racism to me, and I nod as to not seem impolite. Her hands are moving and her face is animated as she explains my story to me. She adds #BLM to her bio and absolves herself of guilt. Tucks me into the corners of a hollowed out book and pulls me out when she needs to refresh her memory of this oppression. From my dark gums, the story sounds too much like an autobiography, like a dull throb of history repeating itself. In her delicate fingers, this injustice is an aesthetic. She scribbles the black rage in a pretty font and receives an overwhelming applause. Gets a standing ovation off the backs of my ancestors. Accepts the award on my behalf. She says she's sorry for all that I have to go through. Uses that pink tongue of hers to soothe the sting of my silence. Her work here is done.
I'm gonna say something about neopronouns, and it's the only thing that I think is relevant at all. If you are seriously invested in anti-neopronoun discourse, you are participating in a classical moral panic. It's a moral panic. The reactionary discourse around it doesn't even matter. Like, if you think it's a serious, necessary political position that pronouns have gone too far, neopronouns are taking over, you have fallen for a constructed controversy that will never materially affect you or anyone you know in a negative or a positive way. Do you know a bunch of people in real life who are using frog self pronouns? If you do, have they ever forced you or any other person to use them? Or are an unimaginably tiny and insular community of queer people on the internet being boosted by an algorithm that makes money off of baiting you into an emotional reaction? I said this before when this exact same thing happened last year. You are wasting your time and other people's time manufacturing outrage over what is effectively a moral panic. And if you had been born into a different set of circumstances, you would be the kind of person who thought that, like, Harry Potter was, like, teaching kids to worship the devil. You are your grandparents. And this is how that happens.
Get a big fee for not paying rent. Housing's a human right.
He doesn't know what I know. If you decide to become a landlord in 2022 America, where there's a fucking recession, where every corporation is laying off workers left and right, where sick people have to rely on GoFundMes and a good personality to be able to afford life-saving surgery, where a full-time minimum wage job doesn't even afford you a studio apartment anymore, you're smoking crack if you think that you didn't sign up for having to house some struggling people who are trying to get back on their feet. I couldn't imagine being a landlord right now complaining about freeloaders while my full-time job consists of literally waiting for 10 people to each hand me a check for $2,000, totaling $20,000 a month. Like, imagine being like, everybody wants handouts these days, it's crazy, but then like 100% of your income consists of 60% of 10 other people's income. Greedy American landlords don't just make me hope hell is real, it makes me hope hell can be fucking live streamed on Twitch.